welcome to Race Industry Now, the weekly webinar series from ePortrait. I am Francisque Savignan, the founder and CEO of ePortrait, the global platform for the performance and racing industry. This is episode 335, and we are going to be talking with BOOSTane. Before, let me thank our sponsors, ARP, Performance Plus Global Logistic, Peak Performance, Shop Monkey, and Fifth Third Bank, who make it possible every week for us to join you. So with me this morning are Judy Keane, the co-founder of ePortrait, and a wonderful host, Mr. Jeff Hammond. Judy?
Thank you, Francisque, and thank you to our sponsors as well. So thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to have Ian on today. He is the epitome of what this industry is about. He is a racer, so he's out there racing all the time, and he created an industry product, and that is really truly the heartbeat of what this industry is all about. So excited to have him on. So hello, Jeff. How are you today? You're muted.
Yep.
Sorry about that. I did not want to interrupt, but I guess now it's time for me to interrupt. So yeah, good morning. Excited to be in here. And yes, I have been doing a little research on our guest today, and I find him quite the competitor. And I can't wait to get him on and get a chance to show you that he's not just, as we like to say down south, he's not a one-trick pony. I guarantee you, he's got his eye all over the globe, and he is ready to go and take on the next challenge. I mean, he is, there he is. Good morning, Ian. How you doing?
Good morning.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and ask this question while the rest of the folks are on here, because they might be surprised that you were competing last night, but off the field in a what I consider a very unique, but at the same time, I think it's a great thing to kind of decompress and clear your head. You were playing soccer, right?
Rugby, actually, just
rugby. Okay,
rugby.
That's even more so.
Yeah, if you're competitive in nature, I think it's you look for any outlet you can, and during the week it's a little bit easier to take out that aggression in rugby if I can't get to the track. So,
well, hopefully, like we were laughing about last night before you competed, it looks to me like you came through, pretty good. You didn't get banged up or anything like that. I told you you're gonna have to be here no matter what. So I'm glad you got a smile on your face, and I'm really looking forward to letting the people not only understand how great a product you have developed and what you're doing with your product, but that your background is kind of unique. When I realized that you were actually in Panama for a while and with the company, you're diversified. I guess what I'm trying to say. I saw where you've lived all over the United States and the world, wherever the next challenge takes you, that's where you find yourself going.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of things out there that can, I think, be improved upon, and we see it every day in our society. So a good challenge, I think, gets me up every morning. And this industry has a bunch of them, and constantly looking forward to how I might be able to bring something to the table to push things forward.
Well, you did that back in 2013 whenever you founded BOOSTane, and you have since, turned a lot of heads and got a lot of people looking at your product and how it works within the race industry, but also just in whatever application your product will fit. It's not just strictly competitive. It's for everyday use if you need to, and it's really what I have learned. It is much, much bigger than just one dimensional, and I like that about it.
Yeah. I think a lot of people in the automotive aftermarket, specifically racing, a lot of technologies are developed out of a necessity, a need to solve a problem. BOOSTane was very much that for me. I was racing in college. I couldn't afford race fuel. Certainly on the cheap beer and ramen on budget while I was getting my engineering degree. So I needed to figure out a way to go racing and afford it. And I was going into my final year at Georgia Tech to get my chemical engineering degree, and decided to use some of my professors in a senior exit thesis to develop some new novel technology around fuel additives to solve and kind of shake off some of the negative connotations around additives. And we were able to develop that technology. And the next year I tried out for the Launchpad competition at SEMA, which is kind of SEMA Shark Tank, and ended up winning that competition. And that's really what kicked BOOSTane off, and has allowed me since then to continue to be an engineer and develop new products and try to, bring about that next evolution of fuel technology.
So you said something right there. I want to make sure I understand the way you put it. Not only are you the founder, you're still an engineer. You're still in there being the mad scientist and coming up with the next breakthrough, correct?
Yeah. I'm a better engineer than just about anything. I've had to learn how to be a salesman and a businessman and all of that on the fly. To my core, I'm a racer and an engineer. So I'm going to try to develop products that I feel like I would use and I could win with on the track, and bring those to market. And that's been kind of the mantra or the philosophy that we've carried forward with BOOSTane, is that would we go out and risk our engines and our vehicles on this new technology? If the answer is no, then we need to stay in the lab. But if the answer is yes, then I can feel confident when I have the conversation with a guy who's, poured his entire, winter into developing a vehicle or building an engine for a race program that summer. I can feel confident that I'm going to give him the best performance, the best technology that I have to offer. Because if I've learned anything being in the racing industry, there's no bigger skeptic out there than a guy, at a racetrack. I mean, they've been sold every bit of snake oil on the planet. So I know that I have to shake that connotation all the time. And the only way I know how to do that is hard numbers, being on the dyno, being in the lab, testing, proving. And we've been lucky enough to do that with a lot of good partnerships.
So how does someone decide what octane to tune for or build around? I mean, how do you come up with that? Or what, if somebody asked you that question, what kind of answer would you give them?
Yeah, it's it's a fun question to get, because we can kind of go in so many directions, and I get to really learn about the type of person I'm talking to. Ultimately, the octane and the fuel that you ultimately go with should be a near perfect fit for whatever your application is. Obviously, I typically start with asking somebody what their static compression is. Compression ratio is going to be the biggest variable in deciding the type of, the octane level that you should be working with to be able to compete safely. The higher the compression, the higher the pressure, typically the higher the heat. And as that heat builds up, if you don't have the correct octane, which is essentially a fuel's rating to retard pre-detonation, you're going to have knock. You're going to have pre-ignition that you don't want before top dead center. So that's typically where I set the baseline. But then the exciting part is to get into the subtle nuances of what kind of fuels are out there that can offer different benefits besides just an octane level. Oxygenation has been something that can be a double-edged sword. It has a lot of great benefits, like latent heat of evaporation. So you kind of get that chemical intercooling effect.
Right.
and lowering that charge temperature down. The great example that I usually use to try to explain to somebody what latent heat of evaporation is if you ever take isopropyl alcohol and you pour it on your arm gets cold, right?
Right.
That's essentially what oxygenation is doing to your fuel. It really acts as a chemical intercooler and can be used as a very useful tool in tuning, especially for forced induction, supercharged, turbocharged applications where, you know, a lot of air is being rammed into the, into the cylinder and increasing that pressure. So ethanol oxygenation meth has that effect. The double-edged sword to it is after you pour that isopropyl alcohol in your arm and it evaporates, you can look down and there's a nice dry spot typically that's formed on your skin. And that same effect can happen to a lot of engine internals if you don't take the proper precautions and the type of fuel lines you use, gaskets, things like that. They can absorb the moisture out of those components and create issues. But it's kind of a long way of saying that there's quite a few different ways to skin a cat when it comes to choosing the type of fuel that you need. Compression is obviously a great way to start, but depending on the type of racing and the application, there's a lot of different ways that you can solve the problem. And obviously cost is a great variable that a lot of people, it's typically first is what octane should I be running and what's the most affordable way that I can do it is oftentimes the first two questions that I get. So all things that need to be taken into account, but luckily enough, we've been doing it long enough that we typically send people out on the track with a fuel that is customized as the engine that they're running it in.
All right. Real quick here, we talked about this yesterday afternoon. We got some folks that are listening in, and the panelists have got some questions. And I'm going to go ahead and start here by recognizing Michael from up in Aberdeen, Washington. Glad to have you here today. Richard from Toronto, Canada is listening in. But we've also got a question coming out of this. It says, I was looking on your website using BOOSTane with methanol. Have you ever tested that?
I love that one. And I get BOOSTane with E85 a lot as well. Okay, I'm going to give a thorough answer on this because this is a question that we do get often. Alcohol, whether it be methanol or ethanol, is hygroscopic in nature. So that's a fancy way of saying that it absorbs water out of the atmosphere. So if you leave your meth or your E85 out for too long, a side effect is that you could absorb water into your fuel, which is bad. No, nobody wants water in any type of gas. The technology that I ended up developing in college is a chelated carrier that keeps all of our active ingredients in solution kind of indefinitely, which doesn't allow stuff to settle to the bottom. One of the benefits that we didn't really anticipate seeing was folks started using our product to stabilize that water absorbing mechanism in methanol and E85 to help stabilize it and slow that degrading effect that a lot of the fuel has over a long period of time, which is one way that we've seen our product used with E85 or methanol. But
right. Ultimately,
we've had people use the product as well to increase the effective octane of the fuel also. E85 is an example that I constantly go back to. Unfortunately, people will go and tune their vehicle at a great shop on E85, but then because in the back of their mind they're like, well, I have an E85 pump down the road, and next thing you know, that pump rarely ever has E85. It could be anywhere from E51 to E83, and that could very much affect the performance of the vehicle, sometimes catastrophically, if not if not taken into an account. So I've helped people solve that equation as well, using BOOSTane Professional to blend with an E70 blend to bring it closer to what they were originally tuned for. And I guess for the people that are listening, we are in the new project that we're working on is something specific to addressing the variability of flex fuel from a performance standpoint,
Right.
trying to create a baseline, and also methanol as well. So while we do work, there is some stuff that should be coming out soon that I think would be a great solution for everybody using those two products.
Well, I said this earlier, you said it yourself. You're looking for the next challenge, and it seems like the competitors themselves feed your need for the next adventure or next, challenge that you get into. And here's one of our panelists right now that wanted to know, is there any MMT in your product? And if so, what is it in a quart? Because it was banned in California in 1977. And is it legal in California now?
So manganese, which is the main active component in MMT, is one of the components that is a part of our formulation. The big thing for us is that it's not just MMT. A lot of the negative connotation and the problems around using things like manganese or lead or ferrocene is that in the past, the only way that you could really create octane using one of these active ingredients was to just dump it in, and it would mix with the fuel and the best that it could, and it would create octane. But over a period of time, as you can imagine, manganese, lead, ferrocene, they're very dense, so they will settle to the bottom of the fuel tank, and then would be pulled through the fuel system in a very high concentration, causing a lot of negative side effects. The big thing for us is that we realize that, and I kind of started with a clean slate when I started designing BOOSTane for my senior exit thesis. I knew what the drawbacks were, and I also realized that to be a solution as a performance fuel, you can't be a one-trick pony. You can't be one-dimensional. There are a lot of aspects to an engine that a fuel needs to assess. That's why BOOSTane's formulation isn't just built around MMT or just built around a lubricity mechanism or a detergent mechanism. What we wanted to do is create a total solution that the result would deliver the performance that everybody's looking for, but in a sustainable fashion, which is the most important thing about all of this. Is if we were to create a fuel that gave you great performance, but the negative side effects were so great that you can only use it a few times, that's not sustainable. So we wanted to come out with a product that really delivered upon, the sustainability, the affordability, and then ultimately the performance of everything. Ultimately, we do have race versions of our additive that are not street legal, because we recommend blend ratios that offer very high concentrations of active ingredients, not just manganese, but a lot of other stuff. but we do have street versions as well that deliver incredible performance, race fuel equivalent levels of performance. We did a dyno run not too long ago on an R35 GTR, and I do a knock to knock test. Is a lot of oftentimes the way that we'll kind of prove that our additives are the real deal. And we took a GTR, and it had, I think it was an Alpha 9 kit, so it had a lot of bolt-on parts, bigger turbos, things like that. On 93 pump fuel, we ran it to, I believe it was like 590 to the wheels. But then we started to see that the PCM was pulling timing. So we knew we were at the upper limit of what the 93 octane could do, because it was starting to detect knock. We put our fuel in, we blended it with our mixing chart to about 103 octane. And we were able to go over top of that 590. And I believe the final gain in performance was 177 horsepower, which was incredible. It's one of the biggest jumps that I've ever seen. Obviously twin turbocharged, you can increase boost, and you can do some pretty crazy stuff, and that bottom end is pretty tough. But we saw nearly 180 more horsepower before we started to see that people were, or the PCM was pulling timing again. And we kind of, that's what we call that knock to knock test. But it's a way that we can show that there are fuels out there that can be as customizable as the build that you've created. So it's out there. You just have to, follow the charts and speak to us about it.
Well, I'm gonna make sure I don't leave these folks right here out. Kevin from Nile Maxwell Super Center in Austin, Texas said, "We are excited to implement your product with our Dodge Power program, I should say." So, you got people out there, like you're saying, that got faith in what you have created and currently running it. But I've also got some kind of, like, I guess you say, follow-up questions in regards of, how your product performs as far as the BOOSTane is concerned when it comes to maybe build up within the engine. And, you talked about the magnesium a moment ago, but is there other things that would, boost, but at the same time, that has like as metal properties to it, or that type of?
Yeah, I for the longest time, we had leaded fuel at the pump.
Mm-hmm.
I see one of the questions that came through asking if we use TEL, which is tetrayl ethyl lead. We don't. There's just, again, the side effects, I think, outweigh the benefit in a lot of fashion, especially from an additive side of things, just because our fuel additives were always designed to be that race fuel alternative for the guy that, is going to the track with his spare tires hanging out the trunk. So we didn't really want to use tetrayl ethyl lead because, again, the sustainability, and I didn't think it would be what I would use. We do have leaded race fuels. There are engines that, especially a lot of the classic engines, that love lead because they have a lot of that lubricity to the softer valves and seats and things like that. But tetrayl ethyl lead was just kind of what we had always used. Really came into play, after World War II, when all of the leaded fuels that were being used in those supercharged, Spitfires and Mustangs and things like that. But it's lead's not good for you. So yeah, again, there's finding that balance for whatever the application is. Lead was not something that we wanted to get into because we felt that there was just too many hurdles for our typical customer base, who is the grassroots guy or the guy who wants to go cruising and needs 100 octane and doesn't want to worry about carrying around 5-gallon pails of race fuel. But ultimately, as you kind of said earlier, Jeff, there are those guys that absolutely need race fuel, and we wanted to be able to offer that solution as well. And that's why we, begrudgingly, I worked on developing a race version of E85, because I know E85 is becoming prevalent. And we have leaded versions of race fuel, a 110 and a 116, that guys use all the time. So yeah, there's still a lot to be, that we could all be educated on kind of how fuels are going and the futures of fuels. I learn every day new stuff. A lot of the research that we do with synthetic fuels has kind of enlightened me to what we'll be able to do in the future. But there's still plenty of meat on the bone to work with right now with everything that's going on in our fuels today.
Yeah. How about the question from Luca? Does your product affect the results of oil analysis? And if so, parameters, and he's referring to your BOOSTane professional additive, and I'm using it in my Porsche GT4 build out to about 4.5, pushing 520 horsepower, naturally aspirated, no timing pull. So, pretty nice product. So
yeah.
Any issues there with, oil analysis and keeping up with what's getting in the crankcase?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've done some research around this with actually the driven racing oil guys. And it's, I think a lot of, if you're having fuel contamination in your oil, I think that there's ways to prevent that from happening, regardless of whether or not you're running BOOSTane. Obviously, a proper engine break-in and using a good break-in oil to get good seal is going to really help, mitigate any type of, fuel contamination. But we've used BOOSTane at very high ratios in some of our racing applications and some of our test platforms. And yeah, you could see some manganese in the oil, but if it's, nothing in our experience that's raised any alarms. Typically, if we're seeing an issue with oil contamination, it's because there's been a failure at the kind of the ring, and we didn't break it in properly, or something. There's usually another glaring problem that wasn't created from the fuel necessarily.
Okay. Well, Michael here has got a question about, has anybody ever defined for you the meaning of diesel fuel lubricancy beyond just words? Said another way, do you know the causal mechanism for poor diesel fuel lubricancy?
Yeah. That's a good one. I've always talked about this topic, but kind of put gasoline and diesel right next to each other, because gasoline, in my opinion, the same way diesel has gone through a bit of a de-evolution in a lot of effects, at least from a performance standpoint. Obviously, we have to take care of our planet. We can't just do whatever we want. And because of that, there's been regulations and initiatives put on by the government and the EPA that have forced us to remove certain parts of our fuel. For gasoline, it was lead, and for diesel, it was sulfur. And the ultra low sulfur diesel that we use today, and over the road diesel, not that wonderful red diesel that you get at your buddy's construction company and you can get in trouble for. It's ultimately, in my opinion, it's kind of drying the fuel out. And that's where you lose a lot of that lubricity. And that loss of lubricity, the result is increased wear. Unfortunately, diesel engines inherently are very tough and can withstand a lot of kind of wear and tear before you start seeing the side effects. But they're also pretty expensive to fix. And I think that ultra low sulfur diesel is something that creates a lot of issues. That lack of lubricity, and even the fuel from the direct injected side, creating some gumming, the valves in the seats with the lack of lubricity, you get a lot of sticking and coking. So we actually developed a diesel product, a diesel fleet product, and a product for the winter called Winter Defense. But with it's always funny because we've always been known as the racing and performance product company with our additives. So when people see that we offer a diesel additive, a lot of people assume that we're giving them all of this power because we're increasing the cetane level the same way that we do with our gasoline additives with increasing the octane. And it's a little bit flattering that people are so excited to use our product and talk about the power and the miles per gallon that the fuel efficiency they get back. But it's really, it's not just because of the cetane, it's because we're really just restoring a lot of the things that were lost in our pump fuel, like adding in some lubricity, putting in some very aggressive detergent packages to make sure that things like injectors and valves are staying clean and running properly. We do have a cetane additive that's gonna definitely help if the fuel at the pump is subpar. But ultimately, that seat of the pants feeling that a lot of our diesel customers get isn't necessarily that we're increasing the power. We're just restoring it to kind of its full potential that was lost over time running, the ultra low sulfur diesel that we're kind of forced to use these days.
Well, I can address that because of the fact of my diesel truck that I run around the farm, that when you get subpar fuel at different service stations, you automatically feel it, and you automatically see it at the exhaust. So what you're talking about, if you just clean it up and just get it back to where the vehicle was set as far as to perform efficiently and at its peak, everything comes back in line. So I mean, it's just, again, this give me repeatability is what you're trying to do, is make sure you have consistent product beginning with the fuel, whether it's gas or whether it's diesel. It's still it comes out to the end game, which is better performance.
Yeah. No, and it's funny. It's something that I didn't realize when I was developing the product and starting the company, how much of our business would be around just helping people get to where they thought they were already going to be, getting them to that, just to the initial potential of the engine or its performance, because of what we're stuck with today is we're kind of at the mercy of the fuel that's available to us on a daily basis. And with the 10% ethanol supplementation, and now you'll go to pumps and you see 15%. It really does affect the BTU of the fuel, the energy density of the fuel. I mean, ethanol is cheaper, and it's renewable. But ultimately, it might be 30% cheaper, but it's also about 35% less fuel efficient because it just doesn't hold the energy density. So people just oftentimes will come to me and say, well, I'm not getting the mile per gallon or the fuel efficiency that I once did. It's like, well, the energy is just not in the same gallon of gas that you're using. And that's ultimately what, what the holdup is. So it's tough because I don't think we were really given the full bill of goods when we were kind of sold some of these fuel alternatives out of the gate.
Okay, let me jump in here right quick. I want to make sure we at least touch on this. I know we got some more questions I want to address before we get to the end of the day. But, the different variables that affect, the evolution of your product and everything, government regulations, how much of a hassle is that on a daily basis as far as where you could go and where you can't go because of government regulations?
It's huge, and I'm sometimes I guess to let my opinion come into it a little bit. Some of our bigger hurdles today have been kind of created by we've kind of created them. They're the RPM Act and a lot of the California Air and Resource Board, we were doing there were some bad apples in the group that created some issues for us in the automotive aftermarket, specifically racing application companies. So the climate is today is that you just need to make sure that you're doing things by the book. It doesn't mean that innovation is dead and that things have just kind of stopped. We're not allowed to progress any further. I think we just have to think outside the box a little bit more. And there are new technologies that companies are developing every day. I'd like to think that we have some stuff in the works right now that is going to keep the internal combustion engine relevant into our future, because I do truly believe that the internal combustion engine is going to be around. I think its place in our future is going to look a little bit different because of the type of mandates that different administrations hand down. Obviously, the new one that the Biden administration put forth from the carbon footprint really has shifted a lot of the OEMs. They have to put money where they feel that their futures needs to be if they're going to stay relevant, if these mandates hold up. But I think that opens up the door for a lot of smaller companies like myself and around the SEMA and part trade, the whole automotive aftermarket. I think that really opens the door for us to step up and be nimble and look at the solutions that are out there. Because if we stay the course and just ask them not to mess with us, we'll lose that battle. But if we say, okay, listen, they're going to run defense over here, we just got to run the ball the other direction, we'll still get the yards at the end of the day. We just got to be willing to pivot a little bit.
Okay, we got a couple of questions here. I think pertain to some of this stuff here, and Michael would like to know: have you ever tested HOV, aka renewable diesel energy, diesel fuel? Excuse me. They say that HOV has cetane value is between 65 and 70, and then right below that, Richard was wondering, does your diesel additive use ignition enhancers like 2EHN?
So as far as the renewable diesel stuff, we're a lot further on the synthetic fuel side of gasoline. We've started research on the renewable diesel side of things. We know that our additive is compatible with it, our diesel fleet and winter defense. I mean, obviously I put renewable diesel as kind of the bigger brother, or at least the older brother to the synthetic fuels that are kind of being developed today. You hear in the news all the time about Porsche opening a factory and investing in Peru to turn biomass and carbon dioxide into long chain hydrocarbons, gasoline.
Right.
Diesel has been kind of ahead of that as far as application to the general population. But I've heard a lot of the same as far as the cetane level. And we do help with that with our fleet application. As far as the question about the ignition enhancer, yes, both our diesel fleet and our winter defense do have an ignition enhancer, but more specifically, probably the winter defense side, just because we understand that when temperatures drop to a certain degree, you're going to have issues with cold flow, gelling, but just the cold start. So we're constantly trying to help alleviate that, so guys aren't constantly having to plug their block in at night, so they can get to work in the morning. So diesel's exciting. I think diesel I think it still has a ton of potential, and even in performance, it's just hasn't been as sexy as like all the gasoline applications that we have out there with racing and everything. But I sometimes get more excited about our diesel technology, but everybody sees me racing gasoline cars and all that other good stuff. So the diesel conversation is always different.
In your opinion, then, since you brought up the, I guess you say normally aspirated engine, what do you think the future is? I mean, you're into a little bit of a dogfight. All of us are, because of the mandates that are out there. What do you see, in your opinion, with the people you talk to and you're around, the future of what we're doing currently?
Yeah, the internal combustion engine. I love getting the crystal ball out for this one. I've been lucky enough to work with SEMA's Political Action Committee and lobby on the Hill for the past 5-6 years to try to protect our industry. But the reality of it is I think our future is obviously unknown. But the only is for the most part unknown. But the one thing I do know is that the landscape is changing and it will look differently. I think that there's a place in our future for, the battery electric vehicle, the plug-in electric vehicle. I think in, small metropolitan areas, cruising around on an EV would be awesome, no problemo. I don't have to go very far. I've always got a place to plug in. That's fantastic. But it doesn't solve the issue. Again, going back to energy density and long range travel that Americans and a big part of the world have ultimately enjoyed their whole lives, being able to pick up and go see a city, across country, or I mean, to go just from Cincinnati to Atlanta, which I do all the time, would be such a hard trip to do with a battery electric vehicle. I think ultimately it's going to be a compromise, and there's going to be a lot of blending of different applications. I think that in certain areas, metropolitan areas, you'll see a higher propensity of electric vehicles. In more rural areas, you're going to see the internal combustion engine. But the hybrid application is super exciting to me, just because we already see it in high performance racing, the benefits of having a hybrid performance vehicle. And if we can continue to develop around the smaller displacement, higher compression internal combustion engine, but then augment that performance with, you know, an electric motor, and then tune to it. I mean, all of a sudden you could, you know, if I could have a hybrid, you know, a hybrid Mustang that at under certain loads, I could have 100% torque from an electric motor, while also my twin turbocharged 2.3 liter EcoBoost motor is putting out 350, 400 horsepower, and I add another. The limits are endless, and I think the automotive aftermarket are the people that could push that envelope. But I don't think we can stay in the same place. We just have to be willing to kind of play with the new stuff.
Yeah, very well said. And I think a lot of us were concerned, but we're also very hopeful that common sense eventually will bring us all to the table and sit down and come up with a solution that we all win by doing so. You know, the world gets saved, but at the same time, the rest of us don't get, you know, displaced and basically make it any more difficult to like do our jobs. I mean, I know how it is, like in the farming industry, you know, with all the new product that they're having to put on their diesel tractors and stuff, it makes things really, really, really challenging for them and expensive. So it's trying to hit that happy medium. Yeah.
I think we'll hurt things more if we allow the narrative that electric vehicles are going to be here in the next 3 to 5 years and take over. I think we'll be in bigger trouble if we don't continue to, you know, bring about more efficiency out of the internal combustion engine. If we just stop now. So there needs to be that dialogue. There needs to be that collaboration. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll see Judy and Francis are here, so it means we're running out of time, but I'll make sure I throw this out there real quick. Ray has spoken with you about a BOOSTane order problem, and he said you answered the phone, you spoke to him about this and other things. He was totally impressed. He said you were awesome, top notch, and that he was recommended by a 1,000 horsepower street racer in Oklahoma. So he's the guy that introduced BOOSTane to him, and now he's able to take 104 VP gas from the pump and switch back and forth in his 650 horsepower 10 valve BMW running 12-to-1 compression. So I think that that should be our fitting summation of there's people out there. We've already said that throughout our entire webinar today. They're using your product. It's having results, and when listening to you, there's a lot more coming down the line. So really appreciate your time. Pleasure being here with you today, and look forward to using some product of yours and my tractors.
All right. I know a guy can get you some.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for sharing, you know, so much knowledge and expertise. And that's why we have those webinars, you know, every week. So thank you very much for being with us today. The webinar has been recorded. It will be posted later on the ePortrait platform, distributed through our newsletters and different social media channels. We will be back live again next week. We're going to be talking engineering again, but on the educational side with National Motorsport Academy. So please join us back next week. In the meantime, we pushed Ian and BOOSTane's product back on the homepage of the ePortrait platform. So please go on ePortrait.com. It's open 24/7, 365 and accessible from anywhere in the world. Thank you very much, and let's go racing. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ian.
ePortrait is a digital platform that we've created basically to make life easier in the business community of auto racing.
ePortrait, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier.
When you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
ePortrait really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase, globally erasing product and technology.
Land speed record holder George Poteet's Speed Demon rocketed 481 miles per hour at the Bonneville Salt Flats. You don't go that fast without ARP fasteners.
There is no way that we could go the speed that we've gone, the number of times we've gone, with a lesser quality bolt than ARP supplies to us. And we absolutely wouldn't be where we were today if it weren't for ARP.
When failure is not an option, it's ARP-bolts.com.
We're Performance Plus Global Logistics. Our team of dedicated performance industry and logistics experts get valuable cars and components to the track on time in top condition. We provide expedited logistics solutions for the performance industry using direct routes instead of deferred options, and communicate all necessary information to the appropriate resources to meet regulations and ensure a smooth transit and secure delivery, both domestically and internationally. And we exceed customer expectations by providing best-in-class service with an efficient and cost-effective system in place. Contact us today to book your next shipment.
You work as hard as your truck, and you have no time for downtime. That's why more truck owners trust Blue Def, America's #1 diesel exhaust fluid brand. Each batch is guaranteed pure, so you can avoid costly repairs caused by inferior DEF. Demand America's best for your truck. Blue Def and Blue Def Platinum. Put trust in your truck.
My name is Shadron Sisson. I'm one of the owners of Electrified Garage. So the Shop Monkey software is great since we have the multiple locations. We can dive into each other's location and help out with appointment taking, inventory, customer communication. I can jump into Florida and help out and make an appointment down there, and vice versa. They can make appointments down there for us up here. And then by using our inventory, they can see if we have the parts, and they can get the parts ordered before the customer even comes up here.